In the shabbily underworld of early 20th century America, where Tommy guns spoke louder than words and loyalty was measured in blood, one man's name struck fear into the hearts of Rock Island, Illinois. John Patrick Looney. A ruthless Irish mobster, newspaper publisher, and political puppet master, Looney controlled an empire built on juris. Yet in the twilight of his criminal reign, this same man would perform an act so inexplicable, so contrary to his brutal nature, that it continues to baffle historians today. He built a children's hospital. Born in Ottawa, Illinois in 1866, John Looney seemed destined for respectability. He studied law, passed the bar, and established himself as an attorney. But the courtroom couldn't contain his ambitions or his complete lack of moral restraint.
By the 1890s, Looney had moved to Rock Island and discovered a far more profitable venture, a newspaper called the Rock Island News. But this wasn't journalism, it was extortion with a printing press. Looney would publish scandalous stories about local businessmen and politicians, true or fabricated, then offer to count. Those who refused to pay watched their reputations destroyed in print. Those who paid found themselves under Looney's control, part of a web of corruption that eventually ensnared the entire city. As Prohibition arrived in 1920, Looney's empire exploded.
His gang, armed with the latest weapons, enforced his will with brutal efficiency. Police officers, judges, and politicians were either on his payroll or too terrified to oppose him. Rock Island became his kingdom, and he ruled it like a medieval warlord transplanted into the modern age. The violence was staggering. Looney personally participated in murders, ordering hits on rivals and perceived enemies with casual indifference.
His own son, Connor, became his enforcer, equally vicious, and perhaps even more unstable. Bodies turned up in the Mississippi River. Buildings mysteriously burned. Witnesses conveniently disappeared. By 1922, even a corrupt system has its limits.
A reform movement, fueled by citizens sick of living under mob rule, began to gain traction.
The newspaper wars intensified when rival publications started exposing Looney's crimes. Then came the murder that finally turned the tide. Connor Looney shot and killed a Rock Island police officer in broad daylight. The public outcry was deafening. Federal authorities, who had been building a case against Looney for years, finally had their opening.
John Looney went on the run, fleeing Rock Island with a price on his head. His empire crumbled almost overnight. Associates were arrested, properties seized, his network of corruption exposed and dismantled.
For 2 years, Looney evaded capture, moving from hideout to hideout, watching his life's work turn to ash. When federal agents finally caught him in New Mexico in 1925, the once feared crime lord was a broken, aging man kludgeon. He was sentenced to federal prison for conspiracy to protect illegal liquor operations. While serving his sentence at Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary, something changed in John Looney. Perhaps it was the endless hours of reflection in a cell. Perhaps it was the moment he realized that the life he had built came at the cost of others' happiness. Perhaps it was simply the fear of divine judgment creeping into an old man's mind.
Whatever the cause, Looney became obsessed with a single idea. He would build a children's hospital.
Released on parole in 1934 at age 68, Looney didn't return to crime. Instead, he moved to a modest home and began a campaign that shocked everyone who knew him. He started writing letters, dozens, then hundreds, to former associates, wealthy individuals, and charitable organizations.
Friends, I stand before you today a humbled man, seeking redemption in the eyes of the Lord.
He used every manipulative skill he'd honed as a criminal mastermind, but this time for a legitimate purpose. I have lived a life of sin. I have hurt many people, destroyed families, corrupted the innocent. I cannot undo what I've done, but perhaps I can build something good before I die. The fundraising was grueling. Many refused to associate with him, unwilling to let a notorious gangster clean his conscience with their money. But Looney was persistent, and his genuine remorse seemed to touch some hearts.
He sold his remaining assets, donated his life savings, and continued his relentless campaign.
By 1938, Looney had raised enough money to break ground on a small but functional children's medical facility. It wasn't a grand hospital, more of a clinic, but it provided free or low-cost medical care to the children of working-class families in Rock Island, the same city he'd once terrorized. Looney spent his final years working at the facility, not as an administrator, but as a janitor and handyman. When children asked who the old man sweeping the floors was, nurses would simply say, "Just someone trying to make up for past mistakes."
John Patrick Looney died in 1947. At age 8, spent the last Gangster built his hospital. Whether he found redemption remains a question each of us must answer for ourselves.